Welcome back to Timeless Wisdom. You know we love diving deep, and today we're going to tackle something that might seem a little, puzzling at first.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
The idea of sealed hearts. What does it even mean when someone just doesn't seem to get it?
Like they're blocked somehow.
Totally. And to really unpack this, we're going right to the source, verses 6 and 7 of Surah Al-Baqarah.
Key verses.
Yeah, and along with a few other verses and a hadith, they paint a pretty vivid picture, you know? Have you ever met someone who seems to actually benefit from rejecting faith? Like, they use that disbelief to justify actions that are, against truth and justice.
It's like it's a business model almost.
Yeah, the Quran actually calls it a way of life for them. Frees them from any higher accountability.
Frees them up.
It's as if their hearts are, sealed shut.
That's the core of it, a sealed heart. It's not just about lacking knowledge.
Okay.
It's deeper.
Deeper.
A blockage, a barrier, almost like a spiritual wall.
Wait, hold on a second. Wouldn't that make God seem kind of unfair?
How so?
Like, he's deciding who believes and who doesn't.
Oh, I see what you mean.
What about our free will?
That's where that hadith comes in, about God responding to our efforts. He's not forcing anyone. He makes easy the path we choose. It's like, think about it.
Okay.
If you keep ignoring a friend, turning your back on them,
right,
they eventually stop trying.
Yeah, I get it. So the more we turn away from God, the less receptive we become to his guidance.
Like a muscle.
Our hearts harden.
It's a consequence.
A natural consequence, not some punishment.
Exactly.
And it's not overnight either, right?
No, it's a process. God's given us these amazing tools. Hearing, sight, intellect.
Right, to make choices.
Yes. We use those gifts to see the world, to think, to make decisions.
Ponder.
Exactly. That sealing, that blockage, it comes after we keep rejecting God's signs over and over, consciously.
It's fascinating how that kind of lines up with how we understand things like psychology today, right?
Sure.
The more we repeat thought patterns or behavior, the more ingrained they get.
Hardwired.
Like pathways in the brain getting deeper and harder to change.
A great way to put it.
To really grasp this, I think we need a good analogy.
Oh, I love analogies.
Imagine you're in a blind rage.
Oh, yeah.
Totally consumed by anger.
Yeah.
You can't think straight.
Everything's shut down.
You could barely hear. Like temporary madness almost.
Now, picture that intensity, but it's directed toward rejecting faith.
Intense.
It's like a cloud of disbelief, you know? Quran talks about that. It's like being deaf, dumb, and blind to God's signs. You have the senses, but you're not using them right.
Powerful image.
Yeah.
But if someone gets to that point, is that it? Does God just abandon them?
It's not so much about God abandoning them. It's more like they've turned away from him.
Okay.
Opening themselves up to, let's say, negative influences.
I've heard of that. Like they've chosen different company.
You got it. The Quran mentions devils being assigned to those who ignore God's remembrance. Like they've chosen a different path.
Different companions. But doesn't that raise another question?
What's that?
We know the story of Prophet Noah, preaching for 950 years. God knew a lot of folks wouldn't listen, so why even bother sending a prophet?
That's a question that gets right to the core of this, doesn't it?
It does.
And the answer is this: prophets and scriptures. They're sent as mercy and guidance. They're a clear proof. So on a day of judgment, nobody can say, hey, I didn't know. It's all about free will.
So even though God knows what's going to happen, he still gives us the choice.
Always. He wants genuine belief, a conscious choice to follow him. We're not puppets, right?
Right. It's about that interchange, opening the heart. And the Quran ends this section with a really striking image.
Which is?
It's not just our eyes that can go blind, but our very hearts. It's like we can miss the deeper meaning, the spiritual reality.
Exactly.
And think about it. If the punishment for rejecting something small can be severe,
right,
what about rejecting the creator of everything? The Quran doesn't shy away from emphasizing how serious the consequences of disbelief are.
It's a wake-up call.
Yeah, it makes you think, are we really living in a way that pleases God?
Or are we letting our desires lead us astray?
Big questions.
For sure. Welcome back to Timeless Wisdom. As we keep going with these sealed hearts, I gotta ask you, our listener, something. What's stuck with you so far about a heart getting blocked from truth?
You know, that's a really good question to think about. Makes me think about this whole God knowing the future thing. But we still have free will. It seems like a paradox, but the Quran's pretty clear. God's knowledge doesn't force us into anything.
Exactly. Like, imagine you're watching a movie, for the second time. You already know what's going to happen. But that doesn't mean those characters didn't make their own choices the first time, right? God's knowledge. It's like that. He sees the whole picture.
A whole story.
But we're the ones writing it through our choices.
That's a helpful way to think about it. It's like we're holding the pen, but God already knows what we're going to write.
Yeah.
And those choices we make, they shape our hearts, don't they? The more we turn away,
Absolutely.
the harder our hearts become. It's like a path,
Yes.
that gets overgrown and hard to walk on.
Yes, and that's where the whole blindness thing comes in. Remember, we were talking about physical blindness. Well, the Quran uses that same image to describe a heart that's blind to faith. That's like having perfectly good eyes, but you're choosing to keep them shut.
It's like you're refusing to see. Makes you wonder what kinds of things lead to that spiritual blindness.
Yeah.
Could it be, I don't know, like the constant chase for more stuff, always wanting the next big thing, or all the distractions we face every day, pulling us away from what really matters?
Those are definitely factors, and I think it's going to be different for everyone. It's about taking a good look inward and being honest. Asking yourself, what's keeping me from seeing the truth?
What's blocking the light?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It takes courage to face those tough questions, though, right?
It sure does.
It's admitting that we might be the ones causing our own blindness.
But that's where growth starts.
Oh, I see.
Recognizing those weaknesses, it's actually a sign of strength. It's like step one to breaking free from the chains of our own desires and stepping onto the path of real guidance.
And we're not alone on that journey, right?
Lord.
The Quran says no matter how far we've gone astray, God's mercy is always there, waiting for us to turn back to Him.
100%. Think about Prophet Noah, right? Can you imagine preaching for 950 years and knowing only a handful of people would believe?
Talk about perseverance.
Right. That's serious dedication. It shows how much the prophets believed in God's plan and the hope that even the hardest hearts can change. They never gave up, even when it was tough.
That's inspiring. We may not be prophets, but we can still share that message in our own way, right?
For sure. Whether it's our actions, our words, or just the way we live our lives.
One thing that really stuck out to me was how the Quran emphasizes the consequences. For those who reject faith, it's not meant to scare us, but it makes you think about how serious it is.
It's about the magnitude of what's being rejected. It's not just saying no to some rules.
Okay.
It's turning away from the creator of everything, the source of all love and mercy. And that rejection, it leads to a state of separation, being cut off.
Like choosing to live in the dark when the light's right there. And the Quran mentions those who seek to profit in this life through unjust means. They're going to face a special kind of humiliation in the next. It's like everything they chased, all the wealth and status turns to dust. They're left empty.
Exposed. It's a powerful image, for sure. It reminds us that all those worldly things are temporary.
Yeah.
And that real wealth comes from our connection with God, living a life of purpose according to His guidance.
It's like those verses in Surah Al, where God talks about those who believe and do good deeds. That's where success is, striving to live a life that pleases Him.
Exactly. And that brings us back to sealed hearts, doesn't it?
It does.
It's not just some abstract concept.
Right.
It affects how we live.
So it's about recognizing our choices have consequences.
100%.
If we let greed and envy and chasing those fleeting pleasures consume us, aren't we sealing ourselves off from truth?
Profound point. It's like we're building walls around our hearts, brick by brick.
Wow.
With each bad choice we make. And those walls, they make it harder and harder to see the truth, to feel God's love.
So how do we break those walls down? How do we keep our hearts open, receptive to guidance?
Remember how we talked about using our God-given abilities? That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
We need to be constantly seeking knowledge, reflecting on God's signs, and using our reason to figure out what's true.
Not just going through the motions.
No way.
Engaging with our faith on a deeper level.
Exactly. And one of the most powerful tools we've got for that is dhikr, remembering God. Now you might be thinking, oh, that's just prayer. But it's more than that. It's about making remembrance a part of your whole day.
Weaving that awareness of God into everything.
Exactly. Even when things are crazy, it could be as simple as appreciating the beauty of nature, or pondering a verse from the Quran, or just feeling grateful for what you have. Those little things, they soften the heart. They remind you that God is always there.
It's like building in little God breaks throughout the day. And it's not just solo work either, right? Remember we were talking about negative influences. Well, the other side of that is being around good company, people who lift you up and make your faith stronger.
So true. That righteous company is so important. We need that support,
Yeah.
especially when things are tough. It's like the Quran says, believers are like a building supporting each other.
Makes you think about who you're spending time with, what kind of impact they're having on you. And it's not just people, right? It's what you're reading, watching, listening to. All that stuff gets in.
It does. We got to be careful what we're letting into our minds and hearts. If we're always around negativity or stuff that goes against our faith, it's going to affect us. It's like feeding your heart junk food instead of giving it what it needs.
So it's like a mental diet too. But it's not enough to just avoid the bad stuff. We have to actually do good, put our faith into action.
Yes. Good deeds, they're huge. They're not just some checklist. They change our hearts. When we live our faith, when we act with compassion and justice, it brings us closer to God.
It's like faith without action is incomplete. It's in the doing, the striving that our hearts come alive. Whenever I feel lost or unsure, turning to God in prayer always helps. It's like pouring out your heart to Him, asking for guidance, asking for strengths.
Never underestimate prayer. It's a direct line to the one who knows us better than we know ourselves.
As we wrap up this whole sealed hearts thing, I'm thinking, it's not enough to just get it,
Right. Knowing is one thing.
We got to figure out what we can do to make sure our own hearts stay open to faith.
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. It's like, okay, we've got the diagnosis. What's the treatment plan? And it's not just sitting around waiting for a miracle to happen. Our sources are really big on using what God gave us. Our hearing, sight, intellect. We're supposed to be engaged with the world. Really think about those signs of God,
Ponder.
Use our reason to figure out what's true.
Be active.
Not just passive, right?
Exactly.
Like instead of just accepting things blindly, we're supposed to question, contemplate, and really search for that deeper meaning.
It's about taking knowledge and turning it into wisdom, something that actually changes you.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like anyone can memorize a bunch of facts.
Right.
But it's how you use those facts that shows you really understand. And I remember that verse. Have they not traveled over the land so that they may have hearts by which they may apply reason, or ears by which they may hear? It's like a challenge to really use our hearts and our mind to see the world around us and how it all points back to God. But when we lose that sense of wonder, when life gets, boring, or we just get jaded, that's when doubt can start to creep in.
So true.
So how do we fight that? How do we keep that wonder alive when it feels like we're just going through the motions most of the time?
Well, there's this powerful practice called dhikr, remembering God. And you might think, oh, that's just prayer, but it's way bigger than that. It's about remembering God all the time, not just during your formal prayers.
So it's like weaving that awareness into everything you do, finding those little moments of connection, even when things are hectic.
Exactly. Could be as simple as pausing to really appreciate nature, or reflecting on a verse from the Quran, or just feeling grateful for what you have. Those small things, they're powerful.
They keep the heart soft.
They remind you that God is always there.
It's like those little God breaks we were talking about. And it's not just a solo thing either, right?
No, definitely not.
Remember how we were talking about those negative influences? Mm-hmm. Well, the flip side of that is surrounding yourself with good people who uplift you, make your faith stronger.
That righteous company is so important. It's like we need each other to stay grounded.
Especially when things are tough.
Especially then. It's like the Quran says, believers are like a building, supporting one another.
Makes you really think about who you're spending your time with, what kind of impact they're having on you. And it's not just people either.
It's everything.
It's what you're reading, watching, listening to. All that stuff gets in there.
You got to be mindful what you're feeding your mind and your heart. If you're constantly around negativity or things that go against your faith,
it's going to have an effect.
Yeah. It's like you're choosing to eat junk food all the time instead of nourishing yourself.
So it's a mental diet too. But it's not enough to just avoid the bad stuff. We've got to actively do good, put our beliefs into practice.
Action. It's not just about knowing, it's about doing. Those good deeds, they're crucial. They change us from the inside out.
It's like faith without action is incomplete. It's in the doing, in the striving, that our hearts really come alive. And, whenever I feel kind of lost or uncertain, turning to God in prayer always helps. It's like pouring out your heart to Him, asking for guidance, strength.
Don't underestimate that. The power of prayer. It's a direct line to God. He knows us better than we know ourselves.
And He's always there for us.
Always. And speaking of support, for those who are looking for guidance on navigating those tricky waters, I always recommend The Broke Entrepreneur. They've got great advice on building a strong future, all while staying true to your faith.
It's a good reminder that faith and finances can totally go hand in hand.
They can. And remember, the Quran's wisdom is timeless. Apply it today. Thanks for joining us on Timeless Wisdom.